Hello everyone. In this video class we are going to see the operating system subject module 5. Here in the module 5 we have here syllabus. In the previous video lectures we completed secondary storage structures and protection concepts till capability based system we completed. Now in this video lecture we are starting about case study of Linux. For more information you can refer this operating system principle subject test book by Galvin. Case study of Linux operating system. It is a operating system OS. It is a free operating system. We are going for some history of Linux. Linux is a free operating system based on Unix standards. First developed as a small but self-contained kernel in 1991 by Linus Torvalds, with the major design goal of Unix compatibility. Your major design goal was Unix compatibility, and it is designed in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. And here it is actually in self-contained kernels. It contains one separate kernel for the Linux. Okay, whatever previous we had before the Linux, so there is no self-contained. That means we have different kernels, but here self-contained kernels, but small size also. It has been designed to run efficiently and reliably on common PC hardware, but also run on a variety of other platforms. Here some of the sentences are understand by any person, so that sentence I am not going to explain because that is easy to understand, and if it is difficult then only I will explain that. Here it has been designed to run efficiently and reliable on the common PC hardware. That means we are going for PC hardware, PC, but also run on the variety of other platforms. We can run this Linux operating system in other platform also, including PC. The core Linux operating system kernel is entirely original, but it can run much existing free Unix software, resulting in an entire Unix compatible operating system free from proprietary code. Here it is completely original. That thing here they given in that line itself, that is a Unix compatibility. So why we designed this? Major design goal is Unix compatibility. And what is the another thing? Small, another one self-contained kernel. So that thing they explain here, same concept. Let us go for another one, that is a Linux kernel. We are studying about some of the history, right? So version 0.01 that is developed in May 1991 had no networking, ran only 80386 compatible processor, and on PC hardware had extremely limited device driver support and supported only the Minix file system. Another one we have Linux 1.0, that is somewhat advanced version than version 0.01, that is developed in March 1994, and we have some of the features here. in that Linux 1.0, that is, it supports the Unix standard, that is a TCP networking, TCP over IP, Internet Protocol or Transmission Control Protocol, networking protocols, and BSD compatible socket for networking program, device driver support for running IP over Ethernet, enhanced file system, support for a range of SCSI controller for high performance disk access, and extra hardware support. These are some of the features we have in Linux 1.0. Again, they made some inventions. After that, we got version 1.2, that is March 1995. That was a PC only Linux kernel. That is a final PC only Linux kernel. Now again they made some invention, that is a Linux 2.0, that is released in June 1996. We have mainly that two capabilities here, that is support for multiple architectures, including a fully 64-bit native alpha port. Another capability is support for multi-processor architecture. Many processor, that means many CPU can connect each other through Linux. That means OS is a Linux, many CPUs can use that, and many CPUs can perform operation at a time by using this operating system. That is a multi-processor architecture. Other new features include some, other than these two capabilities, some of the new features we have than previous version. That is a improved memory management code, improved TCP bar IP performance, transmission control protocol bar internet protocol, support for internal kernel thread. Thread means, you know, that part of the process, for handling dependency between loadable modules and for automatic loading of modules on the demand. Module means it is a part of the code, part of the operating system code, that is called module. So we are going to study that in coming slides. Another one, we have standardized configuration interface. These are the some of the additional features in the Linux 2.0. We are coming to another second topic is, first topic is history, second topic is design principles. Here Linux is a multi-user and multitasking system with a full set of Unix compatible tools. Here Unix compatible means it is whatever we are using in Unix, that tools we can use in Linux also. And it is multi-user, multitasking. It's a file system adheres to traditional Unix semantics, and it fully implements the standard Unix networking model. Mainly Unix, right? That Unix compatibility is there in the Linux. So here they given about Unix, because how it is merged, how your Linux and Unix are compatible. Main design goal are, why we are going for Linux, main design goal is speed, efficiency and standardization. We are concentrating on speed and efficiency, also standardization. These three are the design goals of that's a Linux. Components of Linux system. Your like most Unix implementations, Linux is composed of three main bodies of the code. The most important distinction between the kernel and all other components. So by reading this, they given here three main bodies in the Linux. What are the three main bodies? One is kernel. one is system library, third one is system utility. These are the main three bodies of the Linux, or here they given heading components of the Linux. So these are the three components. One is a kernel, one is system library, one is system utility. You will go for kernel. It is a core of the operating system. That means in the Linux, whatever core of the Linux is kernel. The kernel is responsible for maintaining the important abstraction of the operating system, that will maintain abstract thing of your OS, that is a Linux. Kernel code execute a kernel mode with full access to all the physical resources of the computer. So kernel code means, you know what you mean by operating system, that is a midway between your user and your hardware. So that will manage your hardware and that will manage your user also. That will take request of the user and that will manage your hardware. So here they given kernel code execute kernel mode. That means operating system will execute in kernel mode with full access to all physical resources. That means all hardwares of the computer. There is a full access. All kernel code and data structure are kept in the same single address space. Entire kernel code is kept in single address space. That is another point in the case of kernel. Now another component is system library. Here name itself, it contains library. That means lot of functions are present inside the library, right? So we will see that. Defines, that means system library define a standard set of functions through which application interact with the kernel and which implement much of the operating system functionality that does not need the full privilege of the kernel code. Here standard set of functions through which application interact with the kernel. So it contain what? Contain system library contain set of functions. Why we are using functions? Your application is there. Where is the application? In the user side. Applications interact with the kernel. So in order to interact application with the kernel, so we need some types of functions. That functions is there in system library and which implement much of the operating system functionality that does not need the full privilege of the kernel code. Privilege means permission. That does not need much permission from the kernel code. Another component is system utility. System utility perform individual specialized management task. Your system utility that will perform some individual, that is a specialized task. So here in the previous what we seen in the system library, there we have set of functions. In the inside library we have set of functions. Why we are using functions? That by that application from the user side interact with your operating system easily. And once you have that set of functions here, no need to ask permission every time with your kernel, right? So we have set of function in the system library. Every time no need to ask permission. That is a full privilege of the kernel code is there. No need to ask, okay, with the kernel. We have set of functions in the library itself. Then we have system utility. There we have specialized tasks are there that will perform some specialized process or task. That the management task, okay, how managing kernel management task is there in the system utilities. Let us see that one diagram related to this. We have first one is a kernel here, first component. Second component is the system library. Third component is here we have system utilities. Okay, here we have. Then with this we have one another thing, that is a loadable kernel module. So what do you mean by this loadable kernel module? Now let us see that. Kernel module is a section of the code, actually it is a part of the code. So let us see that section of kernel code that can be compiled, loaded and unloaded independent of the rest of the kernel. So it is a section of the code. Okay, the kernel module may typically implement a device driver, a file system or a networking protocol. A kernel module will implement, what do you mean by device driver? In order to control your hardware, we need software tool, that is a device driver. And file system, we know about file system, in the previous module we studied about that. Or a networking protocol. In order to implement this, we have to go for kernel module. The module interface allows third parties to write and distribute on their own terms device driver or file system that could not be distributed under the GPL. Again, the kernel module means part of the code or section of the kernel code. Okay, here the module may typically implement a device driver, file system or networking protocol. These three many etc. But that means we have again some of the things that is implemented by this kernel module itself. Then module interface allows third parties to write and distribute on own terms. That means a device driver, mainly we have device driver. We will concentrate that topic in the next coming slides. Device driver. So kernel module allow a Linux system to be set up with the standard minimal kernel without any extra device driver built in. The kernel module allow a Linux system, that means the Linux is an operating system. Operating system kernel is a kernel module. Module is a part of the Linux operating system. To be set up with a standard minimal kernel without any extra device driver built in. That means some set of device drivers are there in your Linux operating system. There are three components we have in the kernel module. Okay, kernel module means that there is operating system, Linux kernel module. We have three main components. One is module management, second one is driver registration, third one is conflict resolution. So we will see that three things. First one is a module, that is a kernel module management. How to manage that part of the operating system, part of the code. That means a kernel module. Support loading modules into memory and letting them talk to the rest of the kernel. Here main thing is support loading modules into memory and letting them. So here module, it is a part of the code. That part of the code should be loaded in main memory. So about that we are going to see here. Module management, how that module is loaded inside your main memory, and that loaded thing or loaded inside memory, right, some code, how that is discussed or talking with other kernel in the memory. So about that we are going to study in module management. Module loading is split into two separate sections. One is managing section of the module code in the kernel memory, handling symbol that modules are allowed to reference. One is you are loading your module, that means part of the section of the code into memory. Okay, how to manage that we are going to study here. So we are dividing this module management into two parts. One is managing section of the module code in the kernel memory. Anyway, you loaded code, right? how to manage that? So one part is that one. Then handling symbol that modules are allowed to reference. How to handle the symbols that modules are allowed to reference. Module means that are there in your kernel memory. How that symbols are managed or handled, that also we are going to see in the module management. Driver registration is the second type or second kernel module type. Here allow module to tell the rest of the kernel that a new driver has become available. Means in the previous slide we seen some set of device drivers are there in your kernel, right? The set of device drivers. Again, device drivers, what do you mean by device driver? It is a software tool that will manage your hardware. So it will allow or tell the rest of the kernel that a new driver has become available. Other than that some set driver, we have other range. That means I told the set of things we have, set of device driver we have. Other than that we have some other extra thing. Okay, that is extra drivers also available. So that information will give by the driver registration. So in the driver registration we have one table called registration table. So here kernel maintains a dynamic table of all known drivers. So set of drivers, device driver information is there in registration table. Okay, now other than that, what is there in your registration table? One is any extra drivers are there, or provide a set of routines to allow driver to be added or to removed from these tables at any time. Mainly information about device driver will managed by driver registration. What is a driver registration table? A table contains some of the things. First thing is device driver. Second thing is file system. Third thing is network protocol. Then a binary format. So device driver, file system, network protocol and binary format are the four main things we have in registration table. Then conflict resolution, a mechanism that allows different device drivers to reserve hardware resource and to protect those resources from the accidental use by another driver. So simply we can tell that, so we have to protect your resources, hardwares. So any hardware, for that particular hardware we have some device drivers. So that device driver is connected to that hardware. So here conflict resolution means we are giving one protection mechanism on this resource. That means if any other driver accidentally access this resource, means that will lead to some problem. Okay, so in order to avoid that, we are going to protect those resource from accidental use by another driver. Anyway, for that particular resource we have one device driver. Other than that, any other driver will access that particular resource, then that is a problem. Okay, in order to avoid that, we are going for some protection mechanism. That is called conflict resolution. What it contains? Prevent modules from clashing over access to hardware resource. So clashing means if two device driver will access your one hardware, that is called clashing. So we are going for one prevent mechanism. Okay, we are creating one mechanism to prevent these things, prevent this clashing. Another one is a prevent auto probes from interfacing with the existing device drivers. We are going to give one security for existing device driver. Third one is resolve conflicts with the multiple drivers trying to access the same hardware. So same, the first one is there, right? Prevent module from clashing over the access. Same thing here we have to resolve conflict. What is the conflict? Conflict is multiple drivers trying to access the same hardware. We have to avoid that. So for this we need some prevent mechanism. Okay, so that here mainly conflict resolution means we are going to create one mechanism to avoid accessing the hardware by different device drivers. Now process management. Unix process management separates the creation of process and the running of the new program into two distinct operations. Here process management concept we studied in your module 1. So how to manage your process operations, right? So there in the Unix system we have two types of system call. One is fork, one is execute. Why we are using fork? Fork system is system call, that is a system call which is creates a new process. Another system call is execute. Why we are using that? For running purpose. New program is a run, okay, execute. So these are the two system calls we are using in Unix. Here the process management concept, here under Linux or Linux, process properties fall into three groups. This process properties, that is we can call it as process management. In the case of Linux we have three separate parts or groups. One is called process identity, process environment, and process context. We will see that one by one. First one is a process identity. Process identity, you know the process ID, right? Process ID means we have a particular name for this process, recognition for that particular process. How we can recognize that? With some name. For that process ID is required. Another credential is there. What do you mean by credential? We are giving some particular access, either read access, write access for that particular process. That access rights is called credential. And personality. Personality means that particular process having some personality. We will see that. Okay, let us go for first process ID. Short form is PID. The unique identifier for the process. That is a one word answer. Unique identifier for the process. That ID is unique. That is two process can't get same ID. Okay, ID is unique. Used to specify process to the operating system when an application makes a system call to signal, modify or wait for another process. So you can this is somewhat elaborated explanation for process ID, but one word answer is a unique identifier for the process. But what do you mean by credential? That is the second thing in the process identity, credential. Each process must have an associated user ID and one or more group ID that determines process rights to access system resource and files. So access, about access or process right or access is same. So access rights, about that we are going to see in the credential. You know about access rights because in the disk same module we seen in the disk scheduling concept. So about access right. Another one is a personality. So here not traditionally found on Unix system. Personality is not found in Unix system, but under the Linux, in the Linux case, each process has an associated personality identifier that can be slightly modify the semantic of the certain system calls. Okay, we have that personality in the case of Linux, but we don't have in the case of Unix. Used primarily by the emulation library to request that system calls be compatible with the certain specific flavor of Unix. Okay, we are using that some flavors of Unix while building personality of the Linux. Okay, now these are the three things related to process identity. What is the next thing we have? See, this is process management. First thing we see identity, then second environment, then context, right? So process identity is over. Next we are going for process environment. The process environment is inherited from its parents and is composed of two null terminated vector. Two null terminated vector. We have two vectors, but what do you mean by environment? So a process environment is coming from parents, parent to child concept. That is mainly we seen in the Unix, right? Parents to child concept. Everything comes from parent to child. Address space or address region, everything. Okay. The argument vector list is a one null vector. Two, they given two null vector, right? So one is argument vector, another one is an environment vector. The argument vector list the command line arguments. We have command line argument in the case of argument vector, but what is there in environment vector? We have name and value. That is a pair. One is a name, one is a value. So that is there in your environment vector. Passing environment variable among a process and inheriting variable by a process children are flexible. Okay, here passing environment variable from parent to child, so that is flexible. So that is there in your process environment, flexible concept. Okay, and here mainly in this slide you have to know, one is we are process environment means inherited from parent to, that is a child will take everything from parent. Okay, another is we have two vectors, one is a argument vector, environment vector. Argument vector contain command line arguments, environment vector contain name and values, and passing the environment variables from parent to child is flexible. Next we have process context. So here in the case of process context, so you know context means how your process is switched from one to another. Okay, we have two process means how it is switched from one process to another process. So that concept, say constantly changing, in bracket they given the changing process is changing the state of the running program at any point in the time. Okay, state of the running program at any point of time, that is a general definition of process context. So we have one thing, one term in this process context, that is a scheduling context. That is a most important part of the process context. The scheduling context is important. It is the information that the scheduler needs to suspend and restart the process. So what scheduler context contain? It contain information that the scheduler needs to suspend and restart the process. Okay. The kernel maintains accounting. The kernel maintains accounting information. What accounting means, what it contains. Inside this some information is there, right? What information? It contains resources currently being consumed by each process. How many resources, total number of resources are consumed, right, by that particular process. So that information is there in accounting path or accounting account. Okay, account. Inside that account we have which resources, about resources currently being used by each process. Okay, resource information there in account. Then we have file table concept. What do you mean by file table? You know in that file table concept in the module 4. So file table contain array of pointers to kernel file structures. So here we are contain some information. What are the information? Here when making files, input output system calls, process refers to file by their index into this table. So file table contain all the pointer which points to the file. Okay, kernel file. Whereas the file table lists the existing open file. File table contain list of existing which are the open, that means how many files are open, currently open, that thing is there in file table. So file system context applies to request to open new files. File system context, what do you mean by file table? It contains currently opened file information, but file system context will give information about open new file. In order to open new file, that request will give by the file system context. Another, we have signal handler table. What signal handler table contain? It contains specific signals. Information about specific signal arrives. Okay, that thing is there in signal handler table. File table, you know file table, you know accounting, you know signal handler table. Now virtual memory context. What do you mean by virtual memory? We know that in the module 4. So virtual memory context of the process describe the full content of its private address space. So virtual means it is a private address space. Physical and virtual, you know about that. Physical address space, virtual address space, logical address space, right? So here virtual memory context, there is a private address space. Now we are going for another one, that is a process and thread. So very important thing is a difference. What is the difference between process and thread? What is the difference? One line we can tell it as a thread is a part of the process. Part of the execution of the process is called thread. Okay. Linux uses the same internal representation for process and threads. A thread is simply a new process that happens to share the same address space as its parents. Thread, you know, part of the process, right? So process uses data memory, code memory and stack memory. Here inside process we have many threads, so all the thread will share that same code memory, data memory and stack memory, which is created by one process. A distinction is only made when a new thread is created by the clone system call. Clone is a system call. Okay, so we have here two system call information here. One is fork system call. Why we are using fork? To create new process. Why we are using clone? This also create new process, but one difference is there. Here create a new process with its own entirely new process context, but here create your new process with its own identity. Okay, own identity, but that is allowed to share a data structure of its parents. Own identity is there, but data structure is shared by parents itself. That is a clone system call. For fork system call, so here entirely new process context. Here also new process creation itself. Fork and clone both are new process creation. Scheduling. The job of the allocating CPU time to different tasks within an operating system. That is one general explanation or definition of scheduling. Scheduling, you know how to schedule your process to the CPU, or how your CPU is scheduled to each process. Okay, that concept is called scheduling. So a job of allocating CPU time to different tasks, that is called scheduling. When a scheduling is normally thought of as the running and interrupting of process, in Linux, scheduling also includes the running of the various kernel tasks. Anyway, here process is allocated to CPU, right? Or CPU is allocated to each process. Like that, here in the case of Linux, we are going to go for this kernel task also executed. Okay, kernel task also executed in the case of scheduling, but in the previous case only user level tasks are executed. Running kernel task encompasses both tasks that are requested by a running process and tasks that execute internally on behalf of a device driver. Okay, so mainly device driver running process as task that execute internally on the behalf of device driver. So mainly here in this slide what we have to concentrate is job. Here scheduling means allocating CPU time to different tasks. So here process is executed by the CPU. Process is there in your main memory. Along with that we are going to execute, that means various kernel tasks also executed. Okay. Now kernel synchronization. Synchronization means it is a mutual understanding between two processes that is required in the case of synchronization. A request for kernel mode execution can occur in the two way. So however kernel mode request for kernel mode occurs, that is in two way. One is a running program may request an operating system service. In a running program may request operating system service either explicitly via a system call or implicitly. Implicitly means by using some errors. Page fault is error, right? Page fault is a problem. So by using some problems, either that will give you some interrupt, or there is a possibility of system call. Okay, so request an operating system service. That request of operating system service will occur by two methods, either by using system call or by using some errors. Second thing, a device driver may deliver hardware interrupt that cause the CPU to start executing a kernel defined handler for that interrupt. So device driver deliver a hardware interrupt. So anyway, you know, because that is completely device driver is monitoring your hardware, right? It is a software tool to monitor your hardware. So that will deliver a hardware interrupt. By that also your kernel mode execution will occur. Here kernel synchronization requires a framework that will allow the kernel's critical section to run without interruption by another critical section. Here another thing is critical section means it is a part of the code that contains shared variables. So consider we have two process, that two process out of two process any one of the process can enter inside critical section at a time. That is a very important thing. Okay, one of the process itself can enter inside critical section. So there is a synchronization is required between critical section of the different process. Okay, here Linux uses two techniques to protect critical section. I told one of the process should enter inside a one critical section, not more than one can enter critical section. So how Linux will manage that, or how Linux will protect that? First thing is normal kernel code is non-preemptive. Preemptive concept, preemptive, non-preemptive, that you know, non-preemptive means completely that execution will occur, then only that will give time to another, right? So that concept we are seeing here. When the time interrupt is received, okay, interrupt is received while a process is executing a kernel system service routine. So system service routine here, system service kernel system service routine is executing now presently, but there is a interrupt will generated. What interrupt? So here the kernel need, that is this is one flag, that flag is set after once timer interrupt is activated, this flag is set, so that scheduler will run once the system call has completed and control is about to be returned to the user mode. Now why timer interrupt is activated? That means immediately you have to go to user mode, but that is not, you can't go to immediately user mode. Why? Because here we are using non-preemptive concept. Completely that current running service routine is executed, Then once that execution is completed, then this need, this is actually one flag that is activated, and then it is returned to user mode. So this execution method is a non-preemptive method. Okay, by that we can protect this critical section. One method is this one. And what is another method we can go for protecting your critical section? Another method is, second technique applies the critical section that occur in an interrupt service routine. What are this? Here they not given. Second method is directly we are going to concentrate interrupt service routine. What is that interrupt service routine? By using processor, interrupt control hardware to disable interrupt during a critical section. The kernel guarantee that it can proceed without the risk of concurrent access of shared data structure. So here I will go for that previous slide. See, here interrupt is activated. Once interrupt is activated, we are using non-preemptive, that's why immediately it won't come to user mode. Once that system routine is completed, system service routine is completed, then only it comes to user mode. That is called non-preemptive. Okay, but in the second method we are going to disable the interrupt itself. So then we can't activate this. Here, see here in the previous, time interrupt is received, that means interrupt is activated, but here in the next method we are going to disable your interrupt. So there is no possibility of interrupt concept. Directly whatever executing, that will continue till the end, then only it goes to second one. So here we are disabling your interrupt. That concept we are using in second method. To avoid performance penalties, Linux kernel uses a synchronization architecture that allows a long critical section to run without having interrupt disabled for a critical section entire duration. For entire critical section duration, we are going to disable your interrupt, hardware or software, any interrupt we are going to disable that, so that your critical section execution is completed, then only another process can enter inside that critical section. Interrupt service routine are separated into two parts. One is the top half, bottom half. So actually here top half is a normal interrupt service routine, and another is a bottom half. Here bottom half is a run with all interrupt is enabled. So here what is the difference between top half and bottom half? Top half is a normal interrupt service routine, but here you can see continuing that, run with the recursive interrupt is disabled. Interrupt is disabled, but here interrupt is enabled. Interrupt is enabled in the case of bottom half run. The architecture completed by the mechanism for disabling selected bottom half while executing normal foreground kernel code. What is that line? We will see in the next. We have one diagram here. So here you can see top half. So here we are going to disable interrupt. Bottom half, here you see top half means interrupt is disabled, bottom half interrupt is enabled. Here we have interrupt enabled. Next two things we have, lower than bottom half we have two things. One is a kernel system service routine, that is preemptive. Non-user mode program also preemptive, but these two are non-preemptive. So one is top half and bottom half are non-preemptive. So we will see that each level may be interrupted by the code running at the higher level. Okay, this is higher level, this is lower level. Each level may be interrupted by the code running at the higher level, but will never be interrupted by code running at the same or lower level. Only interrupted for higher level, not in the same or lower level. User process can always be preempted by another process when a time sharing scheduling interrupt occurs. What is this time sharing scheduling? We will see that time sharing scheduling means here. Linux uses two process scheduling algorithm. One is time sharing algorithm and the one is the real time algorithm. Here time sharing algorithm for fair preemptive scheduling between multiple processes. Okay, here one of the algorithm is time sharing, another is real time. Real time for tasks where absolute priorities are more important than fairness. Priorities are very important in the real time algorithm. Now we will see that process scheduling class defines which algorithm to apply. Here we have one, we have to choose out of these either time sharing or real time. So which one we have to use? Here mainly time dependent. First one is a time dependent, second one is a priority dependent. For time sharing process, Linux uses a prioritized credit based algorithm. The crediting rule factor in both the process history and its priority. The crediting system automatically prioritizes interactive or input output bound process. Here let us see that different types of real time and time sharing. Linux implement the FIFO. FIFO is one of the scheduling algorithm, and round robin also another scheduling algorithm for real time scheduling classes. In both cases, each process has priority in addition to its scheduling class. FIFO also, round robin also, we are using priority. Okay, real time scheduling algorithm, this FIFO and round robin, because real time you can see here it is priority dependent. If you are using FIFO and round robin, in the case of real time, there we have to use priority, because here in the real time algorithm priority is very important thing. But FIFO and round robin is mainly coming to time sharing algorithm itself, because FIFO and round robin both are time dependent, right? Yes. The scheduler run the process with the highest priority. For equal priority process, it runs the longest waiting one. FIFO process continue to run until they either exist or block. A round robin process will be preempted after a while and move to end of the scheduling queue, so that round robin process of equal priority automatically time share between themselves. Yeah, round robin, you know about round robin, there we have fixed a time slot that is called time quantum. For the time quantum unit we are going to execute that particular process, but in the FIFO case we are going to execute that till end, then we are going to next. Another one, we have priority. Mainly priority we are going to consider instead of burst time, right? We are going to see these three things in the case of process scheduling. So priority means mainly priority dependent. We are not going to concentrate about burst time. Symmetric multiprocessing. Linux 2.0 was the first Linux kernel to support SMP hardware. Separate process or thread can execute in the parallel or separate processor. SMP means, you know, symmetric multiprocessing, many different CPUs, processors, okay, executing in parallel. So here we have that concept in the Linux 2.0, first Linux kernel to support SMP hardware. That means we have that here, see, separate process or thread can execute in parallel on separate processor. That means separate CPUs are there, all CPUs are executing your process at a time, that means in parallel. To preserve the kernel non-preemptive synchronization requirement, SMP imposes the restriction. What is the restriction? Why? A single kernel spin lock that only one processor at a time may execute kernel mode code. So here we have one restriction. What is the restriction? One processor at a time may execute kernel mode code. So this is the restriction we are going to impose in the case of symmetric multiprocessing, mainly in the case of Linux 2.0. So here we seen symmetric multiprocessing and about some algorithms in the previous this is process management and everything. So in the next class we are going to see continuation of this same class about the Linux itself. memory management and inter-process communication that we will see in the next class. Thank you.